Okay, let's jump straight into this. We've got a genuinely fascinating collection of sources today.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. It all centers around suffering, its causes.
Right, drawn from these classic commentaries on the Dhammapada.
Think of it as a deep dive into karmic consequences.
Hmm?
And they show up in some really surprising places.
So our mission today is to unpack these ancient stories, see what they tell us about how important our actions are.
Even, or maybe especially, when someone thinks they're on a spiritual path, right?
Exactly. And we're starting with a real hook, two pretty graphic visions of suffering.
Witnessed by a major figure, Mahāmoggallāna. And both visions kind of demand a deeper look into past karma.
So Moggallāna is our primary witness here.
Yes, great Mahāmoggallāna. Known for his psychic powers, his ability to see things others couldn't.
Okay, so let's get into that first story then.
Right. This one is linked to Dhammapada, verse 223, sometimes called the suffering beings story.
And the setting?
Mount Gijikuta, Vulture Peak. Moggallāna is there with another elder, Lakantara.
And as they're heading down the mountain, Moggallāna sees something.
He does. He sees 5 figures moving through the air. But, well, they're on fire.
On fire, like literally burning.
Literally. Their bodies, their robes, their bowls, even their waistbands, all ablaze. A really horrific image.
Wow, I can only imagine. Lakantara notices Moggallāna's reaction, obviously.
Yeah, and he asks, what did you see?
But Moggallāna doesn't explain then and there.
No, he kind of defers. Says it's not the right time. Basically suggests they ask the Buddha himself.
Okay, so they go find the Buddha at Jetavana Monastery.
And they relay what Moggallāna saw.
And the Buddha confirms it. He knows what Moggallāna saw.
Yes, he confirms the vision and explains exactly who these beings were. And this is where it gets really pointed.
How so?
He says these were monks from the time of a previous Buddha, Kassapa Buddha. They wore the saffron robe. The text calls them Kasavakantha,
Which means?
literally having the neck wrapped in saffron. It signifies they'd renounced the world. They had the outward appearance of monks.
Ah, okay. They looked the part.
They look the part. But, and this is the crucial bit, the Buddha says that despite wearing the robe, their actions didn't match. They couldn't live up to their renunciation.
Couldn't or wouldn't. What did they do?
The sources say they were asanyanyat, unrestrained, lacking control over body, speech, mind, and papatama, meaning they had an evil character, they did evil deeds.
So the robes were just decoration.
Yeah,
no
it's
protection.
None at all. The outward symbol meant nothing without the inner reality, the ethical grounding, which leads directly to the verse the Buddha recites here.
Verse 223.
Yep. Many who wear the saffron robe, kasavakantha, are of evil character, papanama, unrestrained, dasanyanta. Such evildoers are reborn in hell because of their evil deeds.
That's incredibly direct. It ties the vision, the robes, the bad conduct, and the consequence all together.
Absolutely. No ambiguity. The consequence for these specific individuals was rebirth in hell because of those actions.
And the burning state Moggallāna saw, was that hell?
The Buddha explains that was actually after hell. They were reborn as pitas, these suffering spirits, experiencing the leftover results of their karma. The burning was part of that pita existence.
So a double whammy, essentially. Hell first, then this.
The very long and painful trajectory.
What's the key takeaway here, then? It feels like it's about authenticity.
Definitely. It's a powerful statement that outward signs of piety or spirituality are meaningless, even detrimental if the inner conduct is corrupt. Your robes, your title, none of it shields you from karma.
It's about what you do, not what you look like.
Exactly. And the impact of this teaching was immediate case. The sources say many listeners attained stages of enlightenment right then.
It makes you think, doesn't it? About how much we might rely on external markers versus, the actual substance of our character. What does unrestrained look like today?
A very relevant question these old stories throw right at us.
Okay, let's shift to the second vision, because this one, well, it's even stranger, maybe more disturbing.
It really is. Same setup. Moggallāna and Lakantara descending Mount Gijikuta. This time, Moggallāna smiles at a certain point.
Just smiles, not a reaction of horror.
Just a smile, which naturally prompts Lakantara to ask why.
And Moggallāna defers again?
Again. Not the right time, asked the Buddha. So off they go, get alms in Rajagaha, then head to Vijayavana to see the Buddha.
And Lakana asks the Buddha about the smile.
Right. And Moggallāna then describes what he saw, and the description is quite something.
I'm bracing myself.
He says he saw a pita, a suffering spirit. It was huge, maybe 9 feet tall, with a human body,
Okay.
but the head of a pig. And growing out of its mouth was a tail. And from the tail, worms were constantly flowing out.
A pig's head, a tail out of the mouth, dripping worms. That's uniquely grotesque.
It is. Moggallāna even says he'd never seen anything like it. You can almost understand the smile as a reaction to the sheer bizarre horror of it.
Yeah, maybe a smile of disbelief. Or just shock.
Could be. And the Buddha confirms it. He says, yes, I saw that very being myself years ago near the Bodhi tree.
He saw it too, but didn't mention it. Why not?
Out of compassion, actually. He worried people wouldn't believe such a, well, unbelievable description. And their disbelief, their lack of faith, could actually harm them spiritually.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. Protect people from their own skepticism.
But now, with Moggallāna as a second witness, the Buddha felt he could speak about it. He confirms Moggallāna's account is completely true.
Which leads to the inevitable question, what on earth did someone do to end up like that?
Exactly what the monks asked. And the Buddha launches into this long backstory, again from the time of Kassapa Buddha.
Another story from that era.
Yes. This one involves two very senior monks. One ordained 60 years, the other 59. They lived together in a village dwelling, very harmoniously, like brothers, the text says.
That sounds lovely. Real spiritual friendship.
It does. The younger one, despite being very senior himself, served the elder one respectfully, carrying his bowl and robe, doing duties like a novice would.
A picture of harmony.
Okay, so where does it go wrong?
Enter a visiting Dharma speaker. He comes to their dwelling on a day for listening to the teachings.
And he's the source of the trouble.
Big trouble. His intentions were rotten. He saw these two respected, peaceful elders and thought they were too gentle. He actually decided he wanted their dwelling for himself.
Seriously, he wanted to kick them out just because he liked their spot.
That was the motive, so he hatched a plan to make them both flee.
How? What did he do?
He used divisive speech, slander. The sources are very clear. Kathanama Mahasavaja, this kind of talk carries great fault, great danger.
Okay, so what did he say?
Over 3 days, he went to each elder separately and lied. He told the senior elder that the younger one had been complaining, saying the elder wasn't really suitable to associate with, despite his reputation.
And then he told the younger one similar lies about the elder. Exactly. Tailored lies to praise in their minds against each other. Pure fabrication designed to break their bond.
And it worked, after decades of friendship.
Instantly and devastatingly. The sources say they became enraged, kutamanaso. Their friendship, described as being like brothers, was shattered immediately. Like a clay pot hit with a stick, Dhammapadaṭṭhakathā.
Wow, that's incredibly fragile in a way.
Or maybe incredibly potent, the effect of those words. Despite never going for alms separately for all those years, the very next day, they went in opposite directions, out different gates.
Even while the troublemaker was probably pretending to be concerned.
Exactly. The text says he made false pleas for them to stay, but they ignored him and left.
Just heartbreaking. What happened to the two elders after that?
The local villagers figured out pretty quickly what the Dharma speaker had done and were saddened. The elders themselves, they found no peace. Sita Sukha Nama Nalavisu, no happiness or ease of mind wherever they went. Their practice suffered terribly too.
How long did this separation last?
100 years. The Sassatakena. A century of broken friendship and disturbed minds caused by those lies.
100 years. But they eventually reconciled.
Yes, there's a reconciliation. By chance, they ended up in the same dwelling far away and were assigned the same sleeping spot. They recognized each other.
Must have been emotional.
Very. They wept, realized they'd been tricked. Tena amhe pinditukamana evafuta bafisati. He must have said that, wanting to divide us. Confessed their mistake in believing the lies and made amends. Their friendship was restored.
That's good to hear. But what about the Dharma speaker? What was his karmic payback?
This is where the story delivers its most shocking blow. The two reconciled elders went back to their original dwelling. They found the Dharma speaker still there.
And they confronted him.
They told him he was unfit to live there and basically drove him out, snapping their fingers at him in dismissal.
Okay, deserved. But what about his ultimate fate? You mentioned karma.
Right. Now get this. This Dharma speaker had apparently engaged in ascetic practices samadhamo for 20,000 years. 20,000 years.
That's an immense amount of time and effort. Surely that counted for something.
You'd think so. But the text states clearly that his 20,000 years of asceticism could not sustain him against the negative karma generated by that single act of malicious, divisive speech that broke up the elders' friendship.
Wait, 20,000 years wiped out by gossip.
That's the stark message. As soon as he was driven out, he died and was reborn in a Vici hell, the worst hell.
Avicii.
And he stayed there, being cooked, as the texts say, for one entire Buddha interval, ekabudanta, an almost inconceivable length of time.
An entire cycle between Buddhas suffering in the worst hell.
Yes. And after all that, the remaining karmic residue resulted in his rebirth as the creature Mahāmoggallāna saw the swine ghost on Mount Gichakuya, with the pig's head and the worms flowing from the tail in its mouth.
Good grief, the consequence is just staggering. It makes the first story seem almost mild in comparison.
It's truly terrifying. The implication is that the quality and intent of our actions, especially speech, can vastly outweigh the sheer quantity or duration of formal practice.
That one act of intentional harm through words carried more weight than millennia of asceticism.
Precisely. It highlights the unbelievable power and potential danger of speech. And after telling this story, the Buddha delivered verse 206 of the Dhammapada.
Which must be the antidote, right? The guidance to avoid, well, that.
Exactly. The verse goes, one should guard one's speech, pakanuraka, be well restrained in mind, manasasusavuto, and not do unwholesome action with the body, kaina ka kusalayana kaira. One should purify these three paths of karma, etetayo kamapathe visathai, and thereby attain the path taught by the sages, or arahe magamis epavedita.
Guard speech, restrain mind, avoid harmful bodily actions. Purify all three.
That's the core practice. Guarding speech means avoiding lying, divisive talk, harsh words, idle chatter. Restraining the mind is about not cultivating greed, hatred, wrong views. Bodily action is about refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct.
So purifying these three doors of action, body, speech, mind, that's the real path to progress.
That's what the Buddha teaches here. It's the path shown by all the sages, the awakened ones. True spiritual development lies in this purification, not just in time served or robes worn.
The Dharma speaker had the time, maybe even the appearance, but critically lacked the purification, especially regarding speech.
That seems to be the central lesson. And again, the sources note that many listeners attained spiritual fruits upon hearing this teaching. Its power was immediate.
Okay, let's try to synthesize these two stories now. They're both quite intense.
They are common threads. Both involve Mahāmoggallāna's visions on Vulture Peak. Both trace the suffering back to misconduct by people associated with monastic life under Kassapa Buddha.
And both drive home the reality of karma. Actions have consequences.
Definitely. The first story emphasizes that lacking inner restraint, sanyanada, makes outward appearances hollow and leads to suffering.
And the second story zeroes in on the devastating power of malicious, divisive speech, kathanama mahasavaja, showing it can outweigh even vast amounts of practice and lead to truly horrific, long-lasting consequences.
The contrast is key. Outward form, robes, titles, even years of practice is insufficient. What matters is inner restraint, purity of intention, and careful guarding of body, speech, and mind.
That point about the Dharma speaker's 20,000 years being negated is just profound. It really sticks with you.
It suggests the immense negative weight assigned to actions that intentionally break harmony and trust through falsehood.
So, for us listening now, what's the takeaway? Be careful what you say.
That's certainly a big part of it. These are powerful warnings about the impact of our words and intentions. How do we communicate? How do we cultivate our inner lives genuinely, beyond just surface appearances?
Yeah, and how do we recognize real spiritual progress in ourselves or others if it's not just about the externals?
These stories push us to look deeper.
They really do. It makes you reconsider everyday conversations, online interactions, everything.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. The Dharma speaker suffered unimaginably for breaking a spiritual friendship with lies, despite 20,000 years of ascetic practice. What does this incredibly stark consequence suggest about the value placed on interpersonal harmony, on ethical speech, compared to perhaps more solitary or ascetic forms of effort in these traditions?
Like, is how we treat each other more important than how many hours we meditate alone?
That's the kind of challenging question this story leaves us with. What does that profound consequence imply about the weight and importance of our daily interactions and our use of speech? Something to reflect on.